Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America Can We Talk? Today we're going to talk about the question, does it matter why the Democrats subpoenaed Trump's tax records? Nick Adams, founder of FLAG, joins me in studio, and the Democrats' 2020 strategy, bribe them all. Stay tuned.
I am America. One voice, united we stand.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And welcome again to my show. I'm Debbie Georgatos. Big news in Washington, of course, is ongoing tension between Congress and the president over subpoenas two different House committees issued demanding to see President Trump's tax records. One subpoena came from the House and Ways Chairman Richard Neal, who is looking for the tax returns over a 6-year period. And the other subpoena was issued by the House Ways and Means Committee. That was Richard Neal, House Ways and Means Committee. And we also have the other committee. I don't have it right here. But the point of it is two different House committees have subpoenaed President Trump's tax records. And it turns out there is a federal law on the books in Washington, an actual federal law that says the chairs of the committees in Congress that write tax law have an absolute right to access to the tax records of any person, not just the president, any person. You, me, everyone. Political enemies. This law, it is an actual federal statute, says that the committees in Congress, for any legislative purpose, can subpoena the tax records of any citizen. And so now these two committees are using this to seek the tax records from President Trump. And it's really interesting because the law says on written request is from the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee or the Senate Finance Committee or the Joint Committee of Taxation, the Secretary of the Treasury, so the Treasury Department that oversees the IRS, the Secretary of the Treasury shall furnish, seemingly giving the Secretary of Treasury very little room to decline these subpoena efforts. And so, Treasury Secretary Mnuchin has failed to respond. Now he's missed his second deadline. When these subpoenas were issued, the House Ways and Means Committee Chair Richard Neal first gave him a deadline a few weeks ago, and then Mnuchin didn't meet that, and then the second deadline was yesterday. And again, the IRS has not produced the tax records that the Congress is asking for. The reason I want to talk about that today is this: everyone knows that many presidential candidates, especially in recent years, have turned over their tax records as a part of their presidential campaign. It's just become something kind of expected that if you're going to be running for president, you have to subject your tax records to public scrutiny. And so people, of course, will go through, and as recently happened with Beto O'Rourke, or whose real name is not Beto O'Rourke, it's Francis O'Rourke, the Democrat candidate for president. He released his taxes and got a flurry of bad headlines about saying he wasn't very generous. His charitable donations seemed kind of minimal. This isn't very nice. So you do subject yourself to scrutiny when you release tax records. But there is no federal law that says just because you're running for any office that you have to release your tax records. So I want to talk about this from two different perspectives, the legal perspective and then the practical perspective. From the legal side of it, President Trump has actually filed a lawsuit. He is just deciding he's not going to take this demand sitting down. He's going to fight to at least a certain degree. So he's filed a lawsuit essentially saying that Congress has no legitimate legislative purpose to be asking for his tax records. In fact, the lawsuit that President Trump filed, or his lawyers filed, says straight out the Democrats are just seeking this to harass me, to try to, it's a fishing expedition. They're trying to find something to embarrass me. Obviously, this is a request for political purposes. There is no legislative purpose behind this subpoenaing of my tax records. So he's going to have a battle, of course, in court. Many prominent attorneys have weighed in and said, you know, he's going to lose this battle. There is not going to be a judge who's going to say it's okay if he doesn't produce his tax records. And now the two committees, to be clear, in Congress, I mentioned already, the House Ways and Means Committee Chairman Richard Neal. The other one is the House Oversight and Reform Committee Chairman Elijah Cummings. It's Elijah Cummings who has been talking a lot in the media about this, basically saying, you know, we have the right and we want to see him and he can't hide his tax records, blah, blah. So from the legal perspective, I want to just posit this thought. If Congress actually has the right to get anyone's tax records for any legislative purpose they claim, then everyone in this country, everyone, each of us, we have all lost our right to privacy. Generally speaking, when people file tax returns, we assume the IRS is not going to share those tax returns with anyone. We understand them to be private. So what this law is really permitting, because the standard for any legislative purpose, of course, Congress can always come up with a supposed legislative purpose for seeking anyone's tax records. That means that none of us have any right to privacy with our taxes. So I actually can imagine a court at least looking at the question whether the underlying statute is constitutional. Do you really, when you file your taxes in this country, do you agree that the entire country is going to be able to see them, or do you have some expectation of privacy? So there is a legal question. I don't know what will happen. I guess a lot of top legal scholars have been saying President Trump doesn't have a good argument. He's probably going to lose this argument. The Fox News, one of the Fox News lawyers was on saying that he may lose the argument. But I'm glad he's going to make the argument publicly, because I would really like to see the Supreme Court ultimately take that case and decide, does everyone in this country have to abandon their right to privacy in their taxes if Congress happens to want to see your tax records? I think there's at least a colorable question. I hope it gets litigated, because even if the Supreme Court says, well, Congress has to have, you know, some kind of legislative oversight, and so part of that may be they occasionally have to ask for tax records. The Supreme Court could rule that the law is overly broad or vague or some other basis rule against it. But even if the Supreme Court upholds the law, I like the idea of the American public realizing, wait a minute, everybody's tax records are subject to subpoena by Congress? So I think it's a great wake-up. It may result ultimately, if the Supreme Court upholds this law and says that Congress actually has the right to demand anyone's tax records, I think there may be a push in Congress to change that law, which there should be. There's not any reason that America has to put in the hands of the power of Congress, who, by the way, gave themselves this power because they wrote that law, to see anyone's tax records they wish to see. That's the legal side. There may be a silver lining to all of this, even if the Supreme Court rules that the law is constitutional and therefore Trump has to produce his records. I think it could be a really good time to talk again about whether we really want to give Congress that power and whether a future Congress should change that law. On the practical side, I have a couple of observations. The law is clear that if you do get this subpoena and you do respond and you do provide your tax records, the law is clear that they're supposed to be held in confidence by the committee that subpoenaed those tax records. So there should be, absolute secrecy among the committees in Congress who get a hold of these tax records if they do. The odds of that are zero, zip, nada, nil. We have watched Congress, as part of the leaking machine in Washington, leak everything antithetical to President Trump's interests. Everything throughout the Mueller investigation, throughout the Trump-Russia collusion hoax, Congress leaks everything. There is no integrity. There will be no privacy of anyone's tax records if you comply with a subpoena. You have to assume that your tax records will be in the front page of the Washington Post and New York Times. Second practical point. Everyone who is in a higher economic echelon, such as President Trump, could take all of their tax records every year, all their records related to writing their tax return, give it to 10 different high-end, top-notch, first-rate tax preparers, and they will get 10 different answers, 10 different drafts of their taxes to be filed. The point is, much as people like to think law is black and white, in the world of taxation, especially complex tax returns, such as President Trump undoubtedly has to return, you're going to have judgment calls made by tax preparers, dozens and dozens and dozens of them. Any lawyer worth his or her salt could look at the tax returns President Trump filed and say, well, you know, that's a very questionable. He took this deduction, this amount, it should have only been this. He should not have been allowed to characterize this particular income or money as in this category, had to be this category. There is no way that the best tax preparer on the planet Earth could prepare President Trump's taxes and have them be in such a form that they could never be contested. Once President Trump's tax records over the last, one committee asked for 6 years, one asked for 8 years, not just tax records, but everything, underlying documentation, mountains and mountains of documents. This will be an unending attack on President Trump and his financial situation, his tax records, from the day he responds to that subpoena, if he turns his tax records over, until the 2020 election. And this is exactly what the Democrats in the Congress are doing. This is exactly what they are doing. They are planning to, they are trying to carry out, to push forward their mission to destroy President Trump. They failed in their mission to claim he didn't win. They failed in their mission to claim it was Trump-Russia collusion. This is now the next plan to destroy President Trump, to just have enough information pulled from those tax records, enough information of questionable deductions, questionable characterization of various forms of income, or those kind of taxes are so complex, the average person in America couldn't possibly file their own taxes or even understand them once the tax preparer files their taxes. You go to your tax preparer whom you trust and you give them your information and they prepare your taxes. The average individual is not in a position to understand the legal issues behind the decisions that tax preparers make. So the House Democrats are setting themselves up to create headlines for the next, from now until November 2020, trying to attack President Trump with some argument that he cheated on his taxes. So this is a practical reason why President Trump is going to say, you know what, I'm going to fight this as far as I can. I will say this, if you're an advisor to President Trump and he's saying, you know, and you know, every presidential candidate pretty much for the last several decades turns over their tax records to the public. They make them public. They deal with the backlash. They deal with the criticisms. They deal with the just everything that you're going to get, all the flack you're going to get from your political opponents. But you decide that it is better to expose your taxes, deal with the criticism, than to decline to release your taxes. President Trump is unique in this way. He has declined to release his taxes really since the campaign was going on in the 2016 primary. A lot of pressure on candidates, and once he won the primary, a lot of pressure. He's decided not to. I don't know his reasons, and neither do the Democrats. Neither does anyone know his reasons. What they do know is that Trump has made the decision up until this point, he would rather take the criticism in the media than release his taxes. Now, maybe his taxes, the biggest problem is that it will allow the left to just revel in pointing out his extraordinary wealth, revel in the idea that the amount of deductions he gets, that his deductions he can take, the amount of income, are just so extraordinary, so grand in comparison to the average American, that that, he's just going to look like a rich guy in the left. If there's no mistakes at all in his tax return, no questionable characterizations, they can still just use it to attack him and say, look how unbelievably wealthy this guy is, and use it as one of the American left's endless efforts to characterize America as the rich versus the poor. So this is where with President Trump, I don't know the outcome, but in wrapping up this first five today, I'm going to say President Trump fighting to this point. I love the idea of challenging the constitutionality of the law that says that these House members can issue a subpoena to get his taxes. And remember, your taxes, anyone's taxes, if they claim to have a legitimate legislative purpose. A second grader could come up with a legitimate legislative purpose for which these tax records are being subpoenaed. So it's going to be an interesting battle to go on. I'm kind of on the side of people who say I'm glad he's fighting. I hope the Supreme Court at least will take a look at the case and decide the law is too broad. And you know what? If it is, it is. And we'll deal with the consequences. But it's a really good thing to have this challenge ongoing. And now I'm finally done with my first five. Turning now, we have a guest in studio today. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we have Nick Adams, who's just made it in studio. Hello, sir.
Hello, Debbie Georgatos. Always a pleasure to see you. Sorry I'm a little late.
No problem. It's great to see you, too. Great to have you in studio. I did not get a chance to tell our listeners about, I'm just going to give them the briefest introduction to you, and then we're going to rock and roll. So Nick Adams founded a group called FLAG, F-L-A-G, FLAG, which is the Foundation for Liberty and American Greatness. As he said to me one time, I can't believe that that URL wasn't taken. So he's got, his organization is FLAG. It has a tremendous purpose of essentially arguing for America's goodness and greatness and bringing that message to school children who sadly aren't hearing enough about that in public school. I'm going to turn to Nick now and let him tell us more about it. So again, welcome.
Thank you, Debbie.
And as you can hear from his accent, he is Australian. And so he's been kind of an America lover from his youth. But I don't want to go back into much in your background because we have a lot to talk about FLAG. So let me start with this, sir. Why did you form FLAG? Tell our listeners, if you would, the purpose.
Well, so Debbie, FLAG is an organisation that is dedicated to two things. Number one, teaching civics, and number two, putting patriotism back in public schools. We do it three ways. Number one, through classroom visits. Number two, through the creation and distribution of resources. And number three, through professional development for teachers, where we teach teachers how to incorporate American exceptionalism and patriotism into their lesson plans, curriculum development, and the general school environment. So FLAG is all about making sure that the next generation of Americans understand what it means to be an American, that they're proud of their country, and that they have the confidence and the knowledge to protect it whenever it's under attack. And as we know, it's perpetually under attack in the culture, including in classrooms at the moment, and FLAG has had incredible impact and unheralded success in an area and an arena really that conservatives had kind of given up on and weren't fighting in. And we're not only fighting, we're succeeding, and we're doing so in a capacity and to a level previously considered impossible. We get testimonials from public school teachers in California. In Los Angeles County, for example, we have over 2,000 of our resources in the hands of more than 2,000 children. So,
okay, let me jump in and ask you about your resources. So you go to public schools. First of all, what age are the kids that you're talking to?
All ages, Debbie. We go into elementary, middle and high schools. Our resources, particularly our Students' Constitution and our Students' Declaration of Independence.
By that you mean written in the level of a, fifth grader, sixth grader?
Precisely. It's for fifth grade, and it's plain English with graphic design and illustrations that are child-friendly. We teamed up with interns from the late Justice Antonin Scalia's office, and we got those resources in that particular form. Our selected readings of the Federalist Papers, while they're also written in plain English, those concepts are far more elevated.
Yes.
So they're much more in tune for 10th, 11th and 12th graders, depending on their level. But we now have either one of those three resources, the Students' Constitution, Students' Declaration, and Students' Selected Readings of the Federalist Papers, in almost 400,000 public school students' hands in all 50 states. Those resources have been a rocket ship for us.
Yeah, I love the idea too. You mentioned California. I want to go back to that. I'm a little surprised, honestly, that a California public school, once they knew the purpose of flag, would even let you in the front door. Who do you have to convince to get to go into these schools?
Well, there's 35 public schools at the moment in California that use our curriculum, that use our resources, and it's school administrators, it's principals, it's teachers. A few of those are in Orange County, which obviously is a much more friendly county in California, but we also have Los Angeles County. We also have El Cajon down close to San Diego. And then also in Northern California, we have some as well. And it really speaks to, Debbie, I think, the fact that we're not political. We're not conservative. We just want civics to be taught the way that it used to be. We want an objective teaching of history. We don't want our young people being inculcated with this self-loathing and this guilt unnecessarily. This is the greatest country in the world. Is America perfect? No. But it's the best thing that we've got, and we've got to protect it at all costs. And so our resources are only one part. We've now moved on to, I think, an even more exciting part, which are teachers, because students and parents are just one part of the equation. The other part are teachers. And the way to, I guess, people always say to me, and I don't say this at all with a big head, people always say to me, if only we could multiply you. Well, we found a way to do that. We now offer professional development for teachers. And this year, in October in Philadelphia, from the 10th to the 13th of October, for the first time ever in the conservative movement, FLAG will be hosting a conference for public school teachers, a professional development conference that they will get credit for from their schools that will enable them to have an all-expenses-paid trip to Philadelphia, tour the Liberty Bell, go to Constitution Hall, walk away with not only credit towards their professional development, which they have to have anyway in order to teach each successive year, but also with 40 lesson plans ready to go Monday morning as soon as they return back to school. This has never been done before. We're really, really excited about it. And this is just the first year. We're aiming to get 50 teachers, but our long-term vision for this is to have thousands, if not tens of thousands teachers, which, of course, will impact millions of students over time.
I just love the thought, too, when you were speaking a moment ago about the literature you've given to these students, 400,000 students. The idea of these kids taking it home for their parents, too. I would imagine some of the parents would be first of all, be really happy to see some of us say, yes, this is what we learned. That's right. The Constitution is an amazingly important document. The Bill of Rights is a beautiful thing. I mean, I think a lot of parents have been clamoring to have their kids learn this more in public school, or not having the parents teaching the kids at home something that's opposite of what they're hearing at school, which is either nothing about America's founding or a very denigrated or a condemnatory picture of America's founding. I bet the parents are loving it too.
They really are. And I hear anecdote after anecdote as I travel the country from parents who say to me, I've started reading this to my child. And this was a great refresher for me. And particularly, Debbie, when it comes to our selected readings of the Federalist Papers, I get parents and adults more generally who say, you know what? I've never read them.
They never read them, yes. I knew you were going to say that. Yeah. Yeah. Wow, that's such a good thing. And it's interesting. It takes an Australian who loved America from afar to come here to form FLAG, to just reinvigorate in our schools this just straight out factual presentation of what America is all about. I just love that. But I want to turn, because as you know, every time you've been on the show, you've discovered, I'm sure the time goes by too quickly. Your organization, FLAG, did the first annual State of American Patriotism report, and it was pursuant to a survey that you did, YouGov, FLAG and YouGov survey of millennials and Gen Z. And so that's basically, 17 to 30-year-olds, is that what that is?
That's right, exactly. So basically we teamed up with YouGov, who are leaders in the polling world, and we looked at 1,100, or I think it was 1,078 people were polled. And we wanted to gauge the level of patriotism in the society. Now, Debbie, I knew it was going to be bad, but nothing could possibly have prepared me for just how bad. 46% of those polled said that they believed that Barack Obama had a greater impact on America than George Washington.
Okay, that's because they hadn't been through the classes that you or information
Exactly.
you introduced in public
Yeah,
school.
well, one of the,
my gosh.
Yeah, one of the reasons why we do this polling is to show the need for flag. We had 22% of those polled said that they believed it was perfectly fine to burn the American flag. We had 23% say that they thought Judge Judy served on the Supreme Court. You can't make this stuff up.
Yeah.
And then we had almost half say that they agreed with one of the following statements: that America is a racist country, that America is a sexist country, that America is a homophobic country. And one last one, we had 21%, one-fifth, say that they believed believed the statement that America was never great and never will be. We're losing our country, Debbie, and the numbers and statistics and the facts that were born out of this poll prove that.
Yeah, I have actually a lot of the poll data in front of me, and I can't read it all. That was a great summary you just gave. One I thought was particularly interesting: 1 in 5 millennials say the U.S. flag is a sign of intolerance and hatred. You have to have been brainwashed by anti-Americanism in our media to even come close to thinking that. I mean, it's simply breathtaking. And, it's kind of funny. We've had this conversation before, Nick, but, the purpose of my show is very much like the purpose of flag. I want to inspire people. You can leave political labels out of it, just entirely. You have to love the idea of America, that idea that has just blessed this country, blessed its people, blessed everyone on earth who sees us and our country as the beacon of liberty, the example of, yes, you can have a country rooted in liberty. You can have a country where you respect individual freedom. And the idea that this precious country would have, it is being attacked from the inside if this is what millennials think. All the things you just said.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's one thing to have opposition from those outside of your country. It's another thing entirely when you've got, in effect, termites that are undermining the country from within. And unfortunately, there are lots of people in America that are rooting for America's decline, if not complete failure. And that's something that we need to address urgently. That's why I set up Flag. And, Debbie, I think a lot of it's got to do with how we do it. And I've always been a big believer in being a happy warrior. Mm-hmm. I've always been a big believer in getting people to tie their own dreams with their patriotism. And if they understand that America being the way that it is and has always been is going to mean that they're more likely to succeed in their own personal life and their own personal dreams that they have in their heart, they're going to be more likely to defend and protect the country. So I want to inspire every American. It's what Flag is all about. Inspire every American to believe in the American dream, to pursue the American dream, and to appreciate the opportunities unparalleled that are present in this country for them to achieve their dream.
I love the idea of happy warrior. Is that a Reagan term? Who first said that? Was it Reagan or Newt Gingrich maybe?
I'm not sure. I thought it was Nick Adams, but obviously not.
And Nick Adams, and then Newt Gingrich copied him. No, but whoever it was, and maybe it is the first. But
I'm sure it's been used before, but I really think it encapsulates exactly what we've got to be, because we do have a war, but there's no sense being pessimistic or angry or loud and screaming. That's not going to achieve anything. Let's inspire. Let's motivate. Let's cajole. And let's get people fired up about the country, not in political terms, but in cultural terms.
Yeah. There's an analogy that my husband pointed out one time, how when people are trained in the FBI to figure out counterfeit money, like how do you examine all these very, very good counterfeits, how do you know which one's counterfeit? And the answer was to really make them study the real dollar, or whatever it is, $20 bill, whatever it is. Because once you know that, the counterfeit is obvious. It's
clear.
kind of like this idea.
Yes,
if you
really
let them know what America is, they hear other things, criticisms or alleged shortcomings. They say no, that's not true, because I know what the real thing is.
Precisely.
I love that.
Yeah, but if they don't know what the real thing is, then they're going to be open to believing in counterfeit ideas.
Yeah, yeah. And I love the happy warrior thing. And actually, many candidates are told, you can't just go out there and criticize the other guy and the other side and say, he's bad, she's bad, he's bad. You have to say who you are, what you stand for, what you want. And to me, if candidates or political types or church leaders, community leaders could all just be talking about the goodness of America from its founding. And because the founding was so good on right ideas, most of our history, though not perfect, but most of America's history is a history of a good and great people continuing to try to improve their country.
Absolutely.
In fact, I had someone, anyway, some debate I was in was saying, well, gee, how can you say it's so great? Because at the founding of our country, we had slavery. The presence of slavery was contemplated in the Constitution, and we had women couldn't vote. Yes, those are true facts. You can't argue the facts. All you can say is America tried to improve. We always thought this isn't consistent with our highest ideals, and we worked and we did fix it. Do you ever encounter students asking those kind of questions?
I do, and I'll give you an example that I had some African American students who took umbrage at my declaration that this was the greatest country in the world, and they asked me how I could say that and then also acknowledge the sin of slavery. And I said, listen, I completely understand what you're saying. Slavery is unforgivable. I said, the only thing I'll say to you is that the United States of America was not the only country to have slavery, but it was the only country to go to war with itself, brother against brother, tear itself apart over slavery to improve, to change. And that's certainly says something about America's self-correction capacity that we've seen throughout time.
Same with the women's vote. I mean, at the time the Constitution was written, most countries did not give, or I don't know if any countries did give the woman right to vote, but we had this process of free speech written into the First Amendment, free speech, freedom of assembly, advocacy, and it resulted in our country finally saying, you know what, that's right. We have to self-correct again.
Exactly.
Another example. Yeah.
Exactly.
Love that. Okay, well, sadly, we are running up in the short of time. I do want you to be able to tell our listeners your organization is just, I love it. I always tell you I love it. The URL is flag.usa.
No, it's flagusa.org.
I knew that.
Flagusa.org.
But you survive on donations, right?
We do. We're 100% funded by generous patriots across the country who believe in what we're doing, who want to support us, who want to make sure that the next generation of Americans know what it means to be American, that they believe in American values, not European values. We are having incredible impact, incredible success, and we'll get to increase that impact and success if we can get more funding.
And more funding means more kids in classrooms learning about America's goodness. I mean, it's just such a brilliant, simple but brilliant idea to get at the heart of the problem. The young generation has to know the goodness of America.
It's all going to hang on that, Debbie.
It's all going to hang on that. And with that, Nick Adams, thank you so very much for coming in today.
Always a pleasure.
And the final topic today, which we are going to get through while my happy and wonderful producer, Matt Stoker, is telling me I still have time to do this, I want to hit something that Elizabeth Warren said. And really, I was first going to talk about just her saying she's a Democrat, a member of the U.S. Senate. She's running for president. She announced recently that she was going to not only advocate for finding ways to give free college, but actually she has a proposal to, in essence, use federal tax dollars to help with student loan forgiveness. So she's basically enticing the entire millennial and maybe Gen Z generation that has big debt to say, vote for me, I'm somehow going to free you from your debt. I'm going to use tax dollars. And I will get to a little bit of the detail about her plan. But the larger picture point I wanted to make about that is I stepped back from just her particular plan, her particular idea. She's talking about essentially free college and essentially loan forgiveness for students. But the larger picture, you put in the context of the other themes of the Democrat presidential candidates who are already lining up. We're apparently going to have 20 Dems in 2020 running for president. So they're going to have a big stage, I guess. I don't know what they're going to do. But so many of the proposals the American left, the Democrat Party is making, are pretty much bribery. Now, not legal, prosecutable bribery, but they are essentially saying, just think about the things they are saying to the voters in this country. Number one, we'll get the millennial vote because we're promising free college, and we're promising, at least in Elizabeth Warren's case, we are promising we are going to take away all their debt. Now you realize the college debt crisis in this country arose due to President Barack Obama's decision to nationalize the college loan process. We used to have loans available in a variety of ways through private banks. When President Barack Obama nationalized the student loan system, it catapulted the student loan debt crisis in this country because, as everything else in the government controls it, makes it worse. But now you have Elizabeth Warren, they're buying millennial young people's votes. Vote for us, we'll take away your college debt. Not solve the real problem, which is getting the federal government out of the college loan business, but simply use other people's money, which is all the federal government's ever spending, is other people's money, fellow taxpayers' money who had to work hard to pay taxes. And she's saying, don't worry, we'll rob your neighbors of their money to pay off your college loan. But another way in which the Democrat Party is simply running on a platform of bribe the voters to vote for us is the discussion of reparations. Nearly every Democrat candidate running for president has either said they actually support reparations. They want to support this bill moving forward to study the reparations issue, so they fully support it, or at least we have to seriously talk about it. They are saying, again, vote for us. We'll take away other people's money through the tax system. Your fellow Americans who worked hard to earn money, we'll take their money and give it to you. The reparations is another form, the reparations issue, another form of left-wing bribery to get votes. We'll fix your college loan thing. We'll take it all away. Your fellow Americans will pay. We'll fix past racism in this country through reparations, which I will probably do another show, another longer segment coming up soon about reparations. But not only the legal technicalities are extremely complicated, but even worse, the pragmatic consequences, the pragmatic issues raised are profoundly complex. Who counts as a recipient? Who should have to pay in as a donor? If your family didn't come here to America long after slavery was over, are you still paying in? Your tax dollars go for this? And there are literally, someone put up a list, I think it was 312 questions, pointing out how absurd the reparations issue is. I just want to make the point today that the Democrat Party candidates for president are running on issues of, we'll take other people's money away to buy your vote. Give it to us, we'll take away your college debt. Give it to us, we'll pay you reparations. And the last thing that is just an unbelievable, to me, it's just an assault on America, but many of the assault on the Constitution, I'll explain that, but many of the Democrat presidential candidates are talking about bringing about, again, the right of convicted felons to vote. Now, Bernie Sanders went further than anybody else. I have a very quick clip of Bernie Sanders, what he thinks about the idea of felons being able to vote in this country. Take a listen.
Does this mean that you would support enfranchising people like the Boston Marathon bomber, a convicted terrorist and murderer?
If somebody commits a serious crime, sexual assault, murder, they're going to be punished. But I think the right to vote is inherent to our democracy. Yes, even for terrible people.
People who are convicted in prison, like the Boston Marathon bomber, on death row, people who are convicted of sexual assault, they should be able to vote?
I think we should have that conversation.
That last person there is Kamala Harris, another one of the Democrat presidential candidates. My point in this segment is just think, when you think about people running for president, I want to hear people with ideas and forward-thinking ideas, people who are going to bring solutions to America's problems, like how do we fix our immigration system to keep it fair, to keep it geared toward protecting the American worker, the American family, the American economy, while still being the most generous nation on earth. How do we fix immigration? How do we stand up to the single largest threat facing America and the world in terms of a dangerous international threat, which is Islamic terrorism? How are we going to deal with that? I want to hear people talking about those kind of problems, how to solve them. What you hear out of the Democrat Party these candidates running for president is all talks of creation of victims, victim classes, of them, the Democrats saying, in fact, the Democrats will often blame the college debt crisis on big banks or mean universities, some other entity, instead of solving the problem, which is getting rid of the government takeover of the national student loan entire student loan process. But they want to talk instead about a victim. You're a victim. You shouldn't have to pay this. We'll take care of it. We'll take other people's money. The whole theme of the American left is never forward-looking. It's never, let's deal with these problems we have: border security, threat of Islamic terrorism in this country, the need to bring jobs back to America, the positive messages that need to be spread in the American culture, in the American population. You're not hearing that from the left. You're hearing, vote for us. We'll take other people's money away and give it to you. That's not good enough for America. And finally today, my friends, I want to turn to our Why It Matters segment, because I do this show every week, every day, 4 days a week, to talk with you about why all the issues we talk about in this country matter to you. So, starting with Trump's tax returns, why this matters to you. We have this hysterical harassment of Trump. He crushed the ruling class party by winning the presidency, but the left's answer is to continue to harass him with the Trump-Russia collusion, with all sorts of other attacks. This effort to subpoena his taxes is nothing more than the abuse of government power, and it hurts all of us. If this law is upheld, this could be you. This could be any official, any person, any private citizen in this country. Subpoena your taxes, leak them to the paper, and you no longer have any right to privacy. There shouldn't be subpoenas or search warrants against any American without some probable cause to believe in criminal behavior. This presumption of innocence is a truly important idea in America. We cannot let it go. These investigations that the Democrats are doing right now in Congress are transparently hyper-partisan. They erode the entire public's trust in government. Slide 2 on why it matters to you. What we talk about on this show matters to you. Education of young Americans. Loved having Nick Adams in studio today. His organization, FLAG, fabulous organization. Why this matters to you. We do not know how to protect and preserve as a country if we don't value the country. If we don't know what it is, we don't know what the idea of America is. The idea to improve America requires truth as to baseline facts about our founding, our Constitution, our Declaration of Independence, the rights we have. These are important things that young people don't learn in schools anymore. They learn instead, and they hear from the left-wing media mob, the leftist lies about America that forever distort and obscure the truth, and therefore misdirect the efforts to improve our country. Too much of the teaching in public schools is disdainful toward the extraordinary idea of the founding of America. Last slide, my wonderful friends, and why it matters to you, the leftist coalitions of the bribed. You have to start talking in harsher terms. We have to, about what the underlying MO, modus operandi, MO of the American left is. Reparations, loan forgiveness, voting rights for felons, these are all free stuff for votes tactics. They do not belong in this country. They elevate group rights over freedom of the individual. They erode the work ethic of those not in prison, and they the redemption, reformation of those who are in prison. They treat government as the ever-growing source of handouts and redistribution schemes, and not as the freedom-enhancing limited government of the American founding. I'm Debbie Georgatos. This is America Can We Talk. Tune in every day, Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time. If you're watching on Facebook Live, please like this, please share these segments, please like our page, please comment, love your comments. If you're watching on YouTube, please comment on YouTube. Feel free to email me at americacanwetalk@gmail.com. And lastly, and as always, speak up for this extraordinary, precious experiment in human liberty, United States of America, because America matters. Talk to you tomorrow.
America, Can We Talk? Truth about America.